The following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network.
Isn't this food wonderful? Imagine for how long and from how far this food has journeyed to make it to our table. Our food looks delicious on our plates, but do you know how much food gets lost or wasted before reaching our tables, even in our households? According to a 2021 study conducted by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the International Water Management Institute, an average of 55% of municipal solid waste in Sri Lanka is food waste collected from wholesalers up to households. Food waste refers to the removal of food from the food supply chain, but which is still fit for human consumption. Most of food waste takes place in wholesale and retail markets, hotels, restaurants, as well as at home. Food waste is affecting climate change through greenhouse gases, which are generated along supply chain operations. Finally, the food that is wasted ends up in landfills that cause environmental pollution, diseases, and catastrophic disasters. Our economies are impacted when we throw our food away because we throw away our money, no matter whether we are a business owner or a consumer. Our farmers work tirelessly, but their efforts and natural resources like water and soil go to waste when the produce is wasted during transportation or when we fail to consume it. A 2021 FAO and EMI sample study of urban households found that on average, nearly 1,000 rupees worth of food is wasted in a week. Knowing how much food we waste helps us understand that we can do something about it. Food connects us all. We all need it, depend on it, survive because of it, and derive happiness from it. So, if we love food so much, why do we let so much of it go rotten in our fridges, get left behind at our parties, and get thrown out in our stores and restaurants? It is up to us, in our own kitchens and at our own tables, to stop this waste. Here are a few simple actions that we can take. Make sure to take a shopping list when going to buy food and buy only what you need. Check expiry dates when buying food and prepare just enough food for those at home. Store food wisely. Move older products to the front of your cupboard or fridge and new ones to the back. Leftovers can be used for your next meal. Sharing is caring. Donate food that would otherwise be wasted. By doing this, we can ensure a wholesome, healthy meal for everyone while protecting our environment too. If we love food, we must take care of it. We must respect food and the journey it takes to get to our tables.
Welcome to Gen XYZ, and this is, as usual, a program where we'll be discussing relevant and pertaining topics regarding the youth, or basically contemporary issues faced by the youth at the moment. But today on the show, we'll be talking about a very serious issue, which is a issue which is not being faced nationally, but also worldwide, I would say. So with today being the International Day of Awareness of Food Lost and Waste, which will be observed for the second time by the Organization of Food and Agriculture, it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Vimlendra Sharan, who's a representative of Sri Lanka and Maldives for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States. Mr. Vimlendra, thank you very much for taking your time to join us today on the show. So I know that the FAO is handling a lot of issues at the moment, but today we would like to focus mainly on the issue of food wastage. So as my opening statement, I really like to let you to discuss about what this food wastage is all about. Of course, we all know what food wastage is, but I feel the definition of food wastage is currently refined towards our homes, and basically people think it's just about throwing away half of our plate whenever we are not hungry. But I believe this issue is something way beyond this. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for having me. And also thank you for bringing together people to really into this discussion group to understand issues around food loss and waste. To your question about what is food loss and what is food waste, we normally tend to divide it into two. So anything which reaches the retail, from production to retail, is what we are quantifying as food loss, and beyond that is food waste. So the food which is produced but is lost on way in terms of their quality and quantity is being factored into food loss, and what is being lost beyond retail stage is going into food waste. So overall, nearly 30% of the food that we produce today globally is lost. So it's a humongous quantity of food going waste every year.
Right, sir. So what is the challenge that we are facing at the moment, and how critical is this issue at the moment for our country and worldwide as a whole?
Let me take the second part of the question first. How critical is it? So we all need to understand that despite the fact that we are producing so much of food, nearly 811 million people are going to go to bed hungry today. And nearly 2 billion people worldwide are eating food which is not nutritious and suffering from malnutrition issues. So this is a humongous problem which is facing the world. And this is happening while we are producing enough food, as I said, but happening because we are not able to reach that food to the people. 30% of it is going waste. The challenge is, how do we reduce this? How do we bring the food wastage down by half, which is the target that we have set for ourselves, and to which Sri Lanka is also a signatory in the Sustainable Development Goal 12 about sustainable consumption. How do we bring food loss and waste down to 50%? And that's the biggest challenge that we are facing today.
Do you think we as a country is taking this seriously enough? My next question to you is about the assumption or the valuation our people are putting towards this problem at the moment. How do you see our people acting towards this at the moment?
Oh, I think there's a fair amount of knowledge and fair amount of concern, fair amount of interest in the policymakers. The government is fully aware of the issues around food waste. We have, along with FAO, along with the International Water Management Institute, IMI, worked with the Ministry of Environment, and we have come out with a roadmap for reducing urban food waste in Sri Lanka. And we hope to now walk down the path and put systems in place along with the government to ensure that food waste is first measured properly, and second, once measured, is tackled properly.
Right. So how serious do you think our people are taking it at the moment? Not organizations per se, but individuals at home, probably in schools, or even in organizations.
So I'm quite positive with what I see amongst the younger generation, especially in schools. And there is a fair bit of understanding in many organizations working at the ground level, especially with children, about issues around food. What is lacking, in my view, is the data to work with, the evidence to work with, and perhaps also a need to build an awareness campaign based on evidence. That is something where we really need to do a lot of work. And one way we can do it is by establishing a platform where ideas can be exchanged, where information can be relayed, And this platform is something that we are working with Ministry of Environment to put in place. Once that platform is in place, I think it will be easier for people who are interested in this line to really access scientific information. I would say if, and this is from the global experience that I have now working in this area for a couple of years, people, if guided properly, take to it very, very swiftly, and they do whatever is possible in their hands to ensure that the waste comes down. But they need that guidance, they need that information, they need that knowledge. And that is where government comes in, that is where international organizations come in.
Right. And another question which I would like to ask you is about the challenge Sri Lanka is facing at the moment when compared to other countries. Do you think we are handling it all that well at the moment?
It's a tough question to answer. Perhaps the better way to frame it is, are we there? And my answer would be no. We are not yet there, but we have started the journey. There are countries in the world which are doing better than Sri Lanka does. But I'm happy to note that, as I said in the beginning, that the government has taken cognizance of this. But internationally, there are many best stories, best practices, which are possible for government of Sri Lanka to pick from and work upon. I could give you multiple examples from other countries where governments are much more proactive, society is much more proactive in ensuring that the waste comes down.
Another question, sir, when considering the food industry or the food agricultural industry, there are various stages, let's say harvesting, production, manufacturing, distribution, post-distribution, wholesaling, and so on. I believe that there's a certain amount of percentage that happens in every stage. What are your thoughts? Which stage do you feel that contributes to the most wastage, and how do you think that we can rectify this issue further?
Surprisingly, as I said, food loss and food waste are nearly contributing equal amount, 17%, and that's where the 34-35% figure is coming. Now, the whole issue has to be seen also in the context of economic development of a country. When you look at developing world where we are, Sri Lanka is, you find that there is a humongous amount of food which is lost, and that is because of issues around transportation, issues around storage. You do not have a very effective cold chain which is there, so you have a lot of perishables like vegetable and fruits going waste. In the Western world, which is quite advanced in transportation and logistics, it's more on the waste side, and that is more of a behavioral issue, where you have enough, so you buy more and you waste more. And there the approach is more how to tackle the behavioral aspect at the level of the consumer, at the level of the restaurants, at the level of the retailers. In the developing world, we still need to invest a lot in technology as far as our logistics is concerned to ensure that we reduce the amount of food which is lost.
Do you think our farmers or the harvesting stage, the people who are initially contributing to this food industry, do you think they are properly aware about this issue, and do you think that they are aware about the tactics or the solutions that they can do in order to reduce this?
No. I think lots need to be done to educate our farmers and educate people at source who are involved in activities around food. We need to prepare education material, awareness material. We need to strengthen our extension services to be able to reach to the farmers, explain to them the consequences of this action. But you have to understand that reducing food loss and waste has its economic impact. And it is going to cost the farmer more if he has to reduce his losses. Now that's a very odd sort of an argument on the face of it, but actually reduction of production may be costly to the farmer, and the society needs to bear that cost. So the consumer and the society has to bear that cost. The government policies become extremely important in this regard. So yes, to your question, are the farmers aware Are they educated enough to understand the consequences of the action? I would say perhaps no. And that is something which I think even our younger population must understand. That when we say it's food waste, it's not just food. You have to understand that you are putting resources into that food. It's soil, it's water, it's fertilizer, it's energy. All of that has gone waste. You have to understand that the food which you are throwing away is landing in some sort of a landfill somewhere, and then contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. If globally food waste was to be taken as a nation, it would be the third highest contributor to greenhouse gases. And annually, I think it's about 1.5 gigaton of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is escaping from landfills around the world and impacting climate change. So it's a very major impact which is there from food waste, and we really have to learn our lessons fast and communicate it to people who are in the food chain.
Mr. Vimlendra, I think we all got a basic idea about what the challenge we are facing at the moment with regard to food wastage, and I really want to touch more on how food wastage is affecting climate change at the moment. But before that, we will have to go into a short commercial break. We'll be back soon. We are in discussion with Mr. Vimlendra Sharan. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Gen XYZ. We are in discussion with Mr. Vimlendra Sharan, who is the representative of Sri Lanka and Maldives of the FAO. And Mr. Vimlendra, I would like to continue our discussion further with regard to food wastage. Why do you think food wastage is happening at the moment? The main reasons for it?
The foremost and the most basic cause is because we have not yet globally, including Sri Lanka, been able to gather very effective data and develop evidence about food loss and food waste. How much food is being wasted? What is the quantitative way to really calculate it? That will really feed into an evidence-based policy to tackle food waste. At FAO, we are working with multiple governments around the world, including Sri Lanka, to develop this quantitative analysis of food waste, both in the urban and in the rural areas. Because to come to a solution, I think we need to first understand the gravity of the problem and the cause, because as I mentioned, every country functions in a different context. What is leading to the food waste which is happening here? That has to be understood in the most granular form for effective policy measures to come in. So what is the most important reason why food is still being wasted? I think first is the lack of data. The second most important reason is the lack of awareness. With the limited data that we have, we can still go out and make people aware about the consequences of their action. But we have not been able to do so. A simple thing about what is the difference between best by date and expiry date or use by date, even these are not very well understood by a common public. And many a times you will find households throwing food which is perfectly consumable, perfectly fine, because it read best by date and they mistook it or they misunderstood it to be something like expiry date or use by date, and they've just thrown it. So this happens on multiple occasions. We have found this happening across the world and here. So after data and evidence, I think what is most important is to take the available information to the people, make them aware about issues around food loss and food waste, and what is the impact, what is the consequence of the action that they take at their individual level, whether it be a family or whether it be a business or whether it be a restaurant.
When considering sellers and buyers, since you mentioned, let's say the consumer is aware about this expiration date and everything, so they decide not to buy this product. So what happens to the retailers after that? They are going to be ended up with having an overstock of expired goods. So what's the next step that they can take in order to with these expired goods without
so
stacking them up?
The retailers have to be careful, and they have to manage their logistics and their stocks in a way that it does not lead to a stage where they have got a stockpiling of expired goods. Now, I'll give you an example from Denmark. In Denmark, the moment something is reaching its expiry, they bring that product to the front of the shop, supermarket. So as the consumer enters, and they put a subsidy to it, they retail it at 50% or 60% of the price. So as the consumer enters, the first thing that he sees are these goods which are selling at 60% to 70% because they are reaching their best buy dates or their expiry dates. This itself has led to a huge reduction in the retailers in Denmark throwing away food because they could not sell it by the date possible. Now that's a very novel idea. In most of the supermarkets, you will not find such things happening. So you have to be innovative. You have to find ways. You have to, of course, find a solution to your own logistic and supply system so that you know what the demand is and how much of stock you're keeping with you to not land up in a problem like that. Now take the example of France. In France, there is a law which prohibits supermarkets to throw away food. They have to tie in with a food bank, and prior to the food expiring, they have to hand over the food to the food bank for further distribution. So you need, either through a movement or through a legal act, put in place systems which ensure that the wholesalers or the retailers do not end up throwing food which is otherwise edible and which could go to serve the needs of people who are actually hungry and need food.
When considering organization and the industrial sector, which sector do you feel has the most amount of wastage at the moment? For example, I feel, in my opinion, it's the hotel industry, because they have to throw away a lot of food once their consumers are done finishing with the buffets. And as the discussion we had earlier, they had to throw away a lot of confinements which are not being used at their buffets or of any sort. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, restaurants do contribute a lot to food waste, but there are ways to handle it. As I said, one good way to handle is for restaurants to tie up with food banks, with soup kitchens. And these have to be a formal tie-in where what is not consumed, say for example at a buffet, is not thrown away, but is actually donated to a food bank, which then recycles it to people who require and who need it. So there are ways in which you can work. I know I was visiting Mexico once, and I chance to go to a restaurant where the waiter came to me and asked me, when I had ordered my starters, whether I needed the whole portion or half. And I just, as curiosity, asked him, why is he asking me this question? And the answer was that we have taken a decision not to waste food. So you pay the same amount, but you're not allowed to waste. They serve you half. You finish that and you want more, they give you the next half. Now these are very, something which you come up with as an innovation, but but excellent examples on how you can, as a restaurant, tackle it. And that restaurant is absolutely full. It's packed. It's not that people are shunning it because they're giving you half the portion. They're actually liking it because the restaurant itself is helping them not to waste food. Sometimes, especially in many restaurants around the world catering to fast food, the amount of, for example, the amount of French fries which come with your burgers is nearly impossible for anyone to consume. So you just leave it and it goes waste. What if the restaurant gave you the choice in the very beginning to just order half and not waste? I think it would be a fantastic thing to do.
That's amazing. But do you think that Sri Lanka is in order to tackle these kind of solutions at the moment? And also you said there are ways of engaging or entangling with the World Food Bank. Do you think there are opportunities here in Sri Lanka for organizations to do so?
Why not? Food bank can be established. You have excellent NGOs working in Sri Lanka. You have excellent civil organizations working here. There is nothing stopping a food bank from being organized. I think the government will be more than happy to support, I'm very sure. And I'm 100% sure that a movement within the country can be started, especially by the young people. Before the show, when I was speaking to you, I gave you the example of this girl in Denmark, Sylvia Jewell, who single-handedly started a movement to reduce food waste in Denmark. And today, with the support of Denmark government, food waste over the last 5 years has come down by 25%. So a lot can be done. And I do not think we should underestimate the capacity or the capability of our young people, of our society, or of our government to start and support something like this. What needs to be done is for them to understand. Our responsibility is to take information to them, make them understand what is happening. Once the people understand the consequences of their action, they are committed enough and they have the integrity to find the solutions themselves.
Right, so we have come to the end of our second segment. On our next segment, I would really like to know the commitment that we as community can do in order to rectify this issue as well. Let's go into a short commercial break. You're watching Gen XYZ. We'll be back soon. Welcome back to Gen XYZ. We are in discussion with Mr. Vimlendra Sharan, who is the representative for Sri Lanka and Maldives of the FAO. Mr. Vimlendra, I think we discussed about a lot of issues right now connected to the food wastage. My next question to you is, how can we address this issue as a community, and what is FAO doing at the moment in order to address this issue?
As a community, I think let's start with what you are doing. I think what you are doing today and taking, with this program, taking information to the younger generation, to the young people in Sri Lanka, I think that's exactly what needs to be done. So as a community, first we have to own the problem. We have to understand that there's food waste. Once we understand the problem and we own the problem, that is the time that we start thinking of solutions. So today we are at a stage in Sri Lanka where we need to make people aware, and I'm perhaps at the cost of repetition and reiteration, I have to say that the amount of information out in the open about food waste is extremely limited, and the ways to tackle it is extremely limited. Everyone at every stage can contribute. Even an individual person or individual child can do a lot by ensuring that his actions do not lead to food waste. As a household, we can do so much. When we go shopping, we can do so much. Shop against a list. Don't shop against what you see. Shop against your requirement. Arrange your fridge in a way that is not cluttered, that you know what is going to go waste. Ensure that you use that before you get onto other stuff. Can you freeze food which is going to go waste and use it later? Can you recycle leftovers and have it some other day? Can you dehydrate food and keep? There are so many solutions possible which we can take to, provided we are ready to accept the problem first and not look at answers coming from elsewhere. Yes, government is responsible. Yes, international organizations like mine are responsible. But I am of the opinion that the solution is best when it comes from you. And therefore, every community, every society, town, village, household, individual has the responsibility to work for this.
Right. When considering a nation as a whole, there's urban and rural areas. Which area in Sri Lanka do you feel that has the most amount of wastage?
It's a global given. The urban areas waste food more. It's also because of the population distribution between rural and urban. So obviously, if more people are staying in urban areas, chances are that there is more food waste in urban areas. It's also a question of your economic well-being. If the percentage of your income that you spend on food is much less than what is happening in rural areas, perhaps when you waste, it doesn't pinch you that much. It's also a question of the way the lifestyle is. It's a question of the consumption pattern. What do you eat? How far away from your place where you eat is the food being sourced from? So these are multiple questions which come into play. Typically, in an urban setting, the supply lines will be much longer than in a rural setting, and that will obviously lead to more food wastage. I can tell you a story from my childhood. Mango used to be a summer fruit for us growing up in Delhi, and we would really look forward to the summers and the first mango coming and be excited about it. Now I've lost my love for mango because I get mango 12 months a year in Delhi. But you have to understand that for getting mangoes 12 months a year, there's a complete supply chain behind it. And how much of effort, energy is going into it, expenses are going into it, because as a consumer I am demanding mango out of season. If I did not, that would all have been a saving and would not have added to impact on, say, climate change. Now, what do I do as a consumer? Can I change my behavior? Can I change my eating patterns? Can I change my demand? These are the questions that you need to ask, and do that.
Is there a method of enhancing the severity of this issue towards the community?
Yes. I think we are responsible, we in places where policies are made, are responsible to take issues like this to the community. And by that I mean the whole system. I don't mean the agriculture ministry or the food ministry or the fisheries ministry. I think perhaps the most important role can be played by the education ministry. How many schools have curriculum which talk about food and food waste? Why can't we introduce that as a topic of discussion within the school curriculum? And that is in the mandate of education ministry. So I think it has to be a very holistic approach, a system-wide approach. We cannot really limit it to one individual or a country or a organization. And the more we work on this as a system, the easier it will be for us to convince people to take the corrective action.
Again, coming into a very international level, I think the whole world has committed to a target of achieving sustainable development by the year 2030. So do you think Sri Lanka is on the right path, or do you think the world as a whole is in the right path, and do you think we would be able to achieve this goal by the year of 2030?
No, I don't think. Let me be absolutely truthful. I do not think we are going to achieve it by 2030. We are not going to eradicate hunger by 2030, and I'm very sad when I say that. Perhaps the pandemic has made it much more difficult, but I must accept that even prior to the pandemic, I don't think we were on the path to achieving it. The challenges are humongous, and the commitment which needs to come forth from national governments, I think we need to really step up. We are on many markers. I think we are actually going away from the target. Take, for example, the nutrition issue, malnutrition. Take obesity. Instead of reducing, I think obesity is increasing in the world. Take the rate at which wasting and stunting in children is reducing. If the rate at which we are currently coming down continues, I don't think we can eradicate these problems even by 2050. We have started on the journey, but I think we need to press the accelerator.
Is there a country where would you say is at least closer towards the target, or who's handling this issue quite well at the moment?
Look, Sustainable Development Goals, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, are actually a product of bottom-up planning. And the countries came together and the countries committed to it. It's not that the UN system has dictated these goals to the country. It was the nations of the world which came together, deliberated on this for nearly 2 years, and finally signed off on the Sustainable Development Goals. And it is their commitment. So I would say that every country is committed towards the Sustainable Development Goals, but as I said, we are at different points in our journey because the start was also different. Every country of the world was and is at a different level of development, and they have taken off from there. There are some aspects in which A country is doing well, there are other aspects in which B country is doing well. Some are nearer to the target, some are farther away from the target. But we got to look at this thing in a totality of the globe. And when you look at it as a global issue, as I said, the journey has started, but we really need to speed it up.
Considering the past until today, what are the actions do you think were the effective solutions that we as a country has taken and which has worked?
I think Sri Lanka has been very effective in the way they have gone about their agriculture, from where they were, say, a decade or two back to where Sri Lanka is today, when you are nearly self-sufficient in rice. You are doing very well in plantation crops like tea and rubber. We need to now ensure that science-backed and evidence-backed policies take us to the next level. And that is the responsibility which the government of the day has taken upon itself. Sri Lanka, I don't know if you're aware that the UN Food System Summit is coming up in September, I think 23rd September it starts. And Sri Lanka already has a pathway paper ready to be presented at the UN Food Systems Summit, where it is committing to a nature-positive way of production, which takes away from the linear production pattern of produce, consume, and waste to a circular economic pattern where you go into regenerative agriculture, where you go into ensuring that you take waste out of the system and use the products, whether they be agricultural or otherwise, to their maximum possible life, where you ensure recycling. So a lot of positive steps have been taken by the government. And in my interaction with the Sri Lankan government, I have found them very, very forthcoming and very positive. But I would like to underline that we should not always keep looking at the government. There's so many things that we can do as an individual. There's so many things that we can do as a society. And that is our responsibility when we understand what is it that I can do which adds to the effort of the government or to the society's effort in improving the situation in which this country is. And that, I think, every listener on this program, every young person must ask this question to himself or herself. What is it that I can do? So while the government is doing it, we have to understand the problems are huge. Very simple example, the municipal corporation is in charge of cleaning your streets. Yes, it must. But should you dirty the street? Should you throw paper? Should you litter? These are individual actions. If you do not litter, the expense on cleaning the street is lower. Why can't we take those lessons and learn from them and understand that we also must contribute?
With that, sir, we'll have to end our third segment and we'll have to go into a short commercial break. We'll be back soon. You're watching Gen XYZ. Welcome back to Gen XYZ. We have reached our last segment and we are in discussion with Mr. Vimlendra Sharan, who is a representative from Maldives and Sri Lanka in the FAO. Mr. Vimlendra, my next question for you in this last segment. You mentioned that no nation is anywhere closer to the 2030 target of halving the percentage of food wastage. Do you think it's impossible to do so, or do you think we just need time to accept that there is a huge issue right now?
Nothing is impossible. Can we deliver by 2030 is your question. And my considered answer is no. Can we deliver it ever? My considered answer is yes. Countries have taken very proactive steps. As I mentioned, Denmark has been able to reduce food waste by 25%. And that's I think, a very, very commendable action on their part. USA has, the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, has thrown open a challenge to US businesses to reduce their wastages by 50% by 2030. And that has been accepted by over 50 business concerns within US. So various countries have gone into this in their own way. Some through the legal route, some by policy route, some by community action, some by individual awareness action. What needs to come about actually is a confluence of all this. The best practices need to be captured, the best practices need to be shared, and people need to learn from each other. There are countries, as I mentioned, at various stages of development. So there will be countries which will require hand-holding, which will require capacity development. And within FAO, we have a very effective program called Hand in Hand. Now, Hand in Hand is basically a marriage between countries which have the capacity, the knowledge, the technology, and those which do not. And we try and bring these two countries together. And that's the whole, in a very simple way, that's the whole idea behind Hand in Hand initiative of FAO. So there is, for example, there is a very good platform in FAO where anybody can join on safe food. And for our listeners in Sri Lanka, the contents of the platform are available in Tamil and Sinhalese also, and they're free. So if this information is available to the people, they can easily access the platform and learn from that platform. And that's the reason why I was mentioning that with Ministry of Environment, one of the recommendations flowing out of the IMI FAO study on Sri Lanka food waste is establishing a local platform right here in Colombo, in Sri Lanka, so that the Sri Lankan people, stakeholders who are interested in this, they are able to access accurate, reliable scientific information.
When again comparing international countries and our national Sri Lanka, how far do you think Sri Lanka has come at this point? And do you think that we can take some lessons from other international countries to implement into ours? And do you think that it will work?
I think Sri Lanka has crossed the first hump, which is most crucial. And that first hump is acknowledging the problem. I think Sri Lanka has acknowledged that there is a problem of food waste. And I'm not, you have to understand the gravity of the assertion that I'm making. It is extremely important to first understand what your problem is, and I think Sri Lanka has. In the study that we did, we found in Colombo that of the total solid waste which goes to the landfill, 50% is organic waste, which is food waste, 50%. So this has now been documented, this has been understood. So I think that is the first step which has happened in Sri Lanka. Can Sri Lanka go on from here? Of course it can. Can it learn from international experience? Of course it can, and it must. That is what best practices are for. We have to learn from each other. We cannot be inward looking. All solutions cannot come from within us. Some will, but there will always remain avenues and platforms which exist elsewhere. And as a nation, we have to have the humility and the magnanimity to accept the world as a whole, as one. teach others where we need to teach, and learn from others where we need to learn. So there are multiple best practices available, documented, available to be shared. And I think the government is on the right course of understanding, documenting the problem, and taking corrective action thereafter.
What do you think that Sri Lanka will face, or the repercussions, I would say, if they don't take this problem seriously? What are the disadvantages of food wastage increasing day by day?
You have to understand that Sri Lanka is a developing country. It's a middle income country, but it's not still in a situation where it can afford to waste. Actually, nobody can afford to waste and should not waste. Now, what happens if Sri Lanka does not take actions to reduce food waste? The first thing which happens is that 30% of food that you are producing is not being utilized. And the consequences I have already spelled out. You are putting your hard-earned resources, whether it be money, whether it be land, whether it be water, whether it be energy, whether it be fertilizer, whether it be human resources, whether it be research, and they're all gone waste. Now, in your house, suppose I give you $100 in $10 bills. Are you willing to tear up $30 and throw it in the dustbin? You will not. So why are you accepting this waste? This is also dollars going in. This is also Sri Lankan rupee going in. We cannot accept it. So we have to take corrective action there, and I don't think there is a way out. We must, because the consequences are dire. Sri Lanka, like every other country, is impacted by climate change. And being an island nation, the impact of climate change on Sri Lanka is going to be that much more severe. Now, what happens to the methane which is escaping from the landfills of Sri Lanka? They are contributing to greenhouse gases. They are contributing to the increase in global temperature. And who's going to bear the consequences? All countries, including Sri Lanka. So there is no way that we can escape the consequences of food waste. And the price will be, to my mind, it will be humongous. I think we have to really understand that and really take corrective action.
When coming towards communal engagement, how far do you feel that the youth has been engaged with these such programs so far, and why do you think youth engagement is important right now?
Currently, I would say the engagement is there. There are youth organizations, there are colleges which are working on it, schools which are working on it. Is it adequate? I would say no. We need to do much more. But I do not blame them for that. I think the blame lies with us, that we have not been able to take this issue to them and make them understand the importance of the issue. Because I think once we do that, the youth of the country will come forward and take corrective action to ensure that food is not wasted. Now, why the youth? I feel there is a power in youth which is in no other section of the society. They are the ones who are going to really impact how the way the country is governed, which direction it goes in, what steps are taken in policy. And the noise that the youth creates, and by noise I'm not meaning noise in a negative sense, I mean the positive buzz or the noise that the youth create around an issue will force policymakers to take action. And that is what is required. And that ability, I think, is there in the youth. And that's why our focus always is that we must have the youth back into the food system, must have them back in agriculture. We are not going to progress with technology, with innovation, with science, with research, unless we have the youth with us. And the future is with them. It's not with people like me, fade out generations, we are gone. The young, the one who's 15, 16, 18, 20, 25, they are the ones who have to come up.
With that, sir, my final question to you, what are the platforms right now which are available so that the youth can reach out to you, and what are the programs that the FAO is starting right now, and their future activities that, or the solutions they have come up with to address this issue of food wastage?
FAO is a global organization, and we are in more in normative work, where we work with national governments in helping them craft relevant policies and build their capacity in policy formulation. We also help governments in bridging the capacity gap that they would have in terms of implementation. Now, as far as food waste is concerned, food loss is concerned, we are working globally, including in Sri Lanka, with the government to ensure that proper policy prescriptions are designed. As we mentioned, we have already done a study with the International Water Management Institute in Sri Lanka to quantify and create evidence about food waste in Sri Lanka, and presented it to Ministry of Environment. And now, with the Ministry of Environment, this national roadmap which has been developed, we need to take it forward. That's the arena in which FAO works. It works with the government. But there is another part to FAO, and that is where our work is with private sector, where our work is with civil organization, the NGOs. And in that, it's more of a direct intervention where we help them craft policies, where we encourage them to take action. And we have a very vibrant platform for everybody. As I said, the safe food, grow food. It's a very vibrant platform which can be accessed by anyone around the world, and available in multiple languages, including Sinhalese and Tamil, where evidence which is gathered from around the world is presented, and policy, prescriptions, best practices are made available for people to learn from. I'm quite sure it will be an exciting journey for people to actually dip into the platform and engage with FAO, which is a very open organization, and anyone on this program, if they wish, can always write to us with their ideas. And from this platform, I can assure you that we will respond to any young person or any person from Sri Lanka who writes in to us with their ideas on how to proceed with this problem which faces the country.
Right, thank you, sir. We've reached the end of our last segment, and it was my pleasure to having you on this day, International Day of Awareness of Food Waste and Loss. Thank you again for taking your time to join us on Gen XYZ.
Thank you for having me.
And that was today's program of Gen XYZ. We'll be back again next week with another contemporary issue or a topic pertaining the youth. I'm Suzanne Shanali. Stay safe and have a good night.